Hey guys, what's up? It is week 374. Have a handful of reviews and a small update. So let's hop right into this. The first one up is from Draft House Films, and this is The World of Kanako. Kanako. I always want to say Kodako, which is the Ashina Tsukamoto movie. But yeah, I've actually never seen this before. I'd heard a lot about it. Pretty good things, actually. This is from 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so let's hop into this. What I will say about a lot of Japanese films in terms of like storytelling is, especially from this time and the post 2000s, there was a lot of unconventional storytelling going around. A lot of kind of either due to Takashi Miike and a bunch of other directors, but nothing ever seemed to go as you would think it is. Characters are not necessarily the people you think they are. They follow dark characters or characters that you think are one thing that are absolutely not by the end of the film. So what we have here is a movie that has kind of a couple storylines going, but the main character is kind of a retired detective. Now he is a drunk, just complete loser. He's been kind of separated from his family, and his ex-wife contacts him and says, "You know what? Your daughter's missing. I don't know where she is." And there's been a recent murder at this kind of supermarket or this like convenience store, and he's kind of like being as like a security guard, but he starts to kind of look into this case, and you think maybe this is a story of redemption where he's going to get his life together and find everything and maybe even rekindle some relationship with his daughter, which he knows nothing about anymore, and his wife, who is obviously a very person with a lot of trauma. And so we progress, and right away we realize this ex-detective, is kind of a piece of shit. He has a couple contacts in a police force, one of which who's constantly smiling. Not a great really. He's very fun, but he doesn't seem like a genuinely great person. Doesn't have any respect for this detective for obvious reasons. And as we dig deeper in this kind of a story, we realize that there's more than meets the eye. And what I really like about this movie is, the character of Kanako isn't somebody who is in the entire film, in the present. You're looking for this character, and it almost becomes this character that at first you're like, you gotta save her. And the more we learn that this character might not be a victim at all. It's similar to The Ring, right? Where you're following this ghost, and you're like, oh, we'll save her and she'll be fine. It's like, maybe not. Maybe the ghost is also wrong, but also bad. And this is where it gets really complicated. There's also these other characters that you get glimpses of in the present, or they are in pictures of the present, and we find out what happens to them. And this goes into darker and deeper and nastier things. I would think something along the lines of the film Cold in July, the American film, very good film, where we learn that it's darker and more depraved than you actually could expect, and it's maybe somebody that you were there to help originally, but once you find them or once you know about them, it's not really that. It's more so to confront that person in a way. And that's insane in this movie, because the more we learn about our lead character, the more he's despicable. There's some old boy stuff, and there's some, like I said, like hardcore weird shit going on underneath there, and a lot of, people in higher positions doing awful things to younger people. And that's kind of, as it gets deeper, it gets crazier and weirder and grosser, and it doesn't end in your typical fashion. It's not your cathartic revenge. It's not even a revenge story at that point. It's just a really screwed up mystery that every time a layer is revealed, it gets more depraved. It's pretty messed up. There's some graphic rape scenes, there's some crazy drug use scenes, and wild manipulation. It's really well done. It's really well acted. The action scenes are done in a really kind of crazy way. They partially go animated and get really weird. I would recommend this. I think it's it's so weird, but you wouldn't really call it a horror film, but no other fans would have it. It's definitely in that subgenre of so screwed up, kind of messed up extreme films or depraved films, and Japan at the time was one of the only countries making those with a budget. And it shows. It's really well made. It's well acted. The lead actor's in a slew of movies, tons of movies. All the performances are solid, and he's a despicable piece of shit too. It's in that vein where you're following this character, and like, do you want him to even find his daughter? Do you want him to have any redemption or any catharsis? I don't know. Does he deserve it? It's just, and here it comes down to, people are always like, well, I need to have likable characters. I never need to. I just need to have interesting characters. You know what I'm saying? Or, characters that you love to hate. There's nothing worse than a movie with a bunch of bland, boring ass characters that have nothing going on. That just sucks. And when some people is like, well, it's because you didn't like him. It's like, no, I don't give a shit if they're likable or not. You know, I mean, Scarface isn't a likable guy, but you like watching him. I mean, there's a reason the movie's so fucking popular, and the soundtrack, and among other things, and the direction. But still, I mean, Scarface is a very popular character for a good reason. It's not always about the likability of someone. It's about the interesting qualities of them, and I wish people would realize that more often. But this is a really good film with interesting characters and messed up characters. Would recommend this. Good stuff. It has been released. This is a re-release of it, so I think it was out of print for a while. So a slew of features on here. The making of The World of Kanako, age 31 minutes with subtitles. Interview with actress Nana Komatsu. In Jap, 34 minutes, and then interview with author Kudo Fukumachi, 7:51 World of, and we have the trailer and teaser. So yeah, good stuff. Check it out. So this one here from Cauldron Films, yeah, everybody's favorite Italian horror film here is Ratman. I'm really happy to see Ratman on Blu-ray. This has been out for a while. This is from 1988, so it's the latter day of Italian horror films. You know, the late 80s and early 90s were a very strange time, right? I mean, the masterpieces had already pretty much all been done, except maybe Cemetery Man and Dead Waters and stuff like that. There was a couple here and there. But the heyday was over. You still have like a slew of these actresses and actors and people behind the screens making these movies. So you got David Warbeck in here. You got Janet Argan from City of Living Dead and Eaten Alive. And you got the guy from Mosquito the Rapist as a photographer. He's also pops up before Flies on Grey Velvet, where he plays a villain. Iguana with the Tongue of Fire. Just a very German-looking character. It's like, hey, we need a Nazi-style villain. We got him. Here he is. So he's in this as well. Ratman, yeah. The title alone makes people be like, what the fuck? And as they mention in the commentary, Lani, he mentions that the original title in Italy was like House on the by the park, in vain of House on the Edge of the Park. But it's like, it's even weirder, and it's hilarious. The commentary is pretty great. Ratman has kind of a, it has a reputation for being really stupid. Shameless put this out on DVD years back. And it was always the critter from the shitter was the tagline. I don't think that was the original tagline because there's not really, the toilet thing was a whole Ghoulies thing. And I do think he probably hides in the toilet in this one a bit. So what happens is in the very beginning, we have the doctor explaining a big, huge exposition dump. He's like, yes, I've mixed rats and a monkey to create. And you're like, oh, okay, thank you for this information. We realized that Ratman is poisonous. I can't help but recall the movie Uninvited by Graydon Clark from, I think, the same year, where we have a cat that pukes up a little venomous cat that kills people. Ratman's in a similar vein. Ratman escapes inevitably, and he's running around these little places. We see the Ratman point of view with his little claws. He's actually played by the world's smallest person from Island of Dr. Monroe. People remember him from being in that movie, of course, where he is the little guy with Marlon Brando, and it's a very infamous thing. I even think he probably makes an appearance in Freaked. I think they used every small person they could find in that. If I might be mistaken on that one because it might be somebody else, but so essentially what happens is Ratman picks people off here and there. They die because they're poisoned. Janet Argan is kind of the daughter of a diplomat of some sort, and she gets called in because her sister is possibly murdered. She shows up and she's like, this isn't my sister. Warbeck somehow overhears it, wants to help her out. They share a cab. He gets involved with this investigation as well. He's got to be a journalist of some sorts. It's just one of these convoluted kind of storylines where Warbeck's in it, but hey, he's dubbed over not by somebody else. You can immediately tell that's not Warbeck's voice. So what happens is Ratman does start to get his little POV perv card out, and he starts spying on the photographer and the models and everything like that. There's a gratuitous shower scene. There's plenty of TNA for this kind of movie. You kind of squeeze it in there, and Ratman starts to attack them. Ratman is a little pervert. He's a little pervert guy, and I mean it's pretty funny. It's very goofy. It's very silly. The soundtrack's pretty solid. The cinematography's pretty good. The production design, it's all pretty solid for what it is. It's one of these movies where you're like, this is much better than it has any right to be. In terms of filmmaking for a movie called Ratman, you're just like, yeah. I mean, and the title Ratman, people are just going to be like, oh, what the fuck? It's one of those titles that you just think, this Ratman, what the... In the 80s, now there's a million movies that sound this stupid or that bad and stupid. Ratman is not really one of them. It's a lot better, than you would expect. Is it silly and cheesy? Absolutely. Is it latter day Italian movie at its finest? Not at its finest, but it's there and it's entertaining. So like as it progresses, Ratman picks some people off, and the ending is a non-ending. It's an ending, but you're like, did they just run out of money or do they just want to leave it open? It's stupid as shit. Ratman's very enjoyable. The special effects are decent. The Ratman himself is overly silly. It's an overly dumb movie that I think a lot of people will get a kick out of, and it's not one so bad. It's one of these ones that I think people do kind of stick their nose up to and laugh at, but not in a hateful way, more in a loving way. You know what I mean? I enjoy it. I think it's good. And for what it is, it's very entertaining. I do like Ratman. As far as the special features are concerned, we have Lightning, the Ratman interview with cinematographer Roberto Girometti, Framing, the Ratman interview with camera operator Federico Del Zoppa, Just a Fin audio interview with post-production consultant Alberto Del Martino, who is a very infamous Italian director himself, commentary by film historians Eugenio Ercolani, Troy Howarth, Nathaniel Thompson, and a trailer. The commentary's great. They do have a couple laughs at the expense of poor old Ratman, but these three are always good. Nathaniel and Troy Howarth have worked in a bunch of commentaries, and Ercolani has worked with these guys as well. And, it's good to always have Ercolani on these things because he's actually from Italy, so there's a little bit more context in there, you know what I mean? Americans, people from other countries can read history and they can talk about the history of the film and stuff, but it does help to have somebody from that actual country who just kind of understands the culture a little bit more. Nathaniel Thompson and Troy Howarth are also hugely fountains of information, and they talk about the cast and all these things and how Warbeck got along with Janet Argan and whatnot. And it's a solid movie, a solid commentary for a silly, good movie. I'll say it's good for what it is. I enjoy it. It's Ratman. Looks really good too, man. You're surprised. Like, that's why the Italian movies is like, their crews are so good at what they do. Rarely do you see an Italian movie look or look like shit or have a soundtrack that's shitty. And Ratman doesn't have either of those. So yeah, it's good stuff. All right, the next one from Cauldron Films is Top Line, or Alien Terminator, which I think is a name for another movie as well. But Top Line stars Franco Nero, William Berger, and George Kennedy, who did a stint in Euro films. He was in the Franco film and a bunch of others as well. But Franco is a very famous Italian actor from the Django movies, from Kioma, from High Crime, from everything. And more modernly, Django Unchained, The Pope's Exorcist. Nero is Force 10 to Navarone, Guns of Force 10 to Guns of Navarone, the sequel to Guns of Navarone. But, Franco is a very popular actor, cult icon. So, yeah, here we have Top Line, which I've never seen. It's one of these ones that I probably figure is more action-adventure, and I will watch those. I do enjoy him, especially the Antonio Margheriti movies. Anything that he does, I tend to like, but more sort of the horror or Vietnam ones I dig. So the action-adventure kind of Italian movie is what I was thinking more, but then with the alternate name Alien Terminator, I'm like, maybe there's a little bit something more. Maybe it's more like Hands of Steel, the Sergio Martino movie or something along those lines. So I pop this in, and we have Franco Nero, who is in, where is he at? Colombia, Argentina, South America somewhere. And he is a drunk reporter who's lounging around completely out of it. His wife runs the newspaper and everything like that. And he's supposed to be doing this story on Spanish conquistadores or something along those lines. His wife calls and says, "You're fired. You're drinking up your paychecks. I'll send you enough money to get your ass back home, and then we're done." At the same time, William Berger comes in and says, well, he's been hearing these weird things that possibly, I can't remember who it is, but some famous explorer was traveling, and his design where he was going was supposed to be here, but he ended up in this place first with a bunch of gold. So he's like, the idea, the story, all this stuff is worth it. Franco Nero's like, well, let's check it out. He ends up discovering that there is a bunch of hidden gold in this kind of treasure ship, a la Goonies, right? And before long, a bunch of people that know about it as well, his friends start getting picked off by this like international group of like terrorists. George Kennedy is this like rich kind of Nazi who collects weird gold and all this shit, and he has got a great scene where he's chasing Franco Nero on this kind of sandbar with cactuses, and he's just driving. I'm like, I'm pretty sure he's dubbed. I don't think that's his own voice. I don't remember George Kennedy ever sounding like that, but I could be wrong. So Kennedy has a nice little tiny role in there. But yeah, as it progresses, it gets more and more wild, and it starts to pull back the curtain, and you realize you're like, this is much, much bigger than just, some hidden gold. There's a fucking spaceship. And guys, I don't want to spoil the movie, but as the alternative name suggests, there is an alien Terminator. And yeah, it is a lot like Terminator. But what happens is, he goes down. He has to fight goons. Everybody's in on it, trying to get him so he won't spill the beans and all this kind of stuff. They want to keep it on the down low because it gets bigger. They live bigger, and I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a wacky, crazy alien transformation that's pretty cool and insane. It's decent action. It's fun action. I spotted. You guys ever see Cannibal Holocaust? Hopefully you have if you're watching this channel. But the opening has the bald black guy, the guy who's the soldier, and he's like, the serum only works half the time. This beer tastes like someone pissed in it. He's in here playing a similar kind of soldier role, and I was like, hey, I'd never forget that guy. He's in here. But yeah, the movie's overall entertaining, wacky, adventure stuff, well shot. Franco Nero is always, got screen presence. William Berger is always welcome. And then, of course, I love George Kennedy, from his stuff Cool Hand Luke to Straight Jacket to the Naked Gun movies, and even his Euro crap. Gotta love George Kennedy from his stuff with Nico Makarakis. Everything. Kennedy's one of those actors who's synonymous with horror and cult films. But so what we have here is Top Line. Great release. Now, I really like the commentary on here. So we have Blacktop, an interview with Franco Nero, The Strange Case of Ted Archer, interview with Eugenio Ercolani, Alien Terminated, the Alien Theories of Top Line by parapolitics researcher Robert Scarvala, audio commentary by film historian Eric Zalvadar. How do I say that? Zaldivar, including audio interviews with cast members Deborah Moore and Robert Redcross, with additional insight in Italian cult films with actors Brett Halsey and Richard Harrison. I like these commentaries because he'll be saying something and I'm like, well, don't take my word for it. Here's an interview I did with this actress or this actor, and they talk about a lot of the people. Now, Brett Halsey isn't in the movie, but Brett Halsey has some insight on William Berger because he has a crazy story about him and his wife getting arrested for marijuana and stuff. I think it was on this movie or one of the earlier movies in the 70s, but I think it was the 70s. Sorry, I'm mistaken that. But the interview is interesting because this guy directly worked with Mike Malloy, who does a lot of special features and things on films and wrote films, and they made, I think these two worked together on the movie Scarlet Worm, which is a pretty wacky, crazy Western. But he talks about trying to get, Django, another sequel to Django made, like the third Django movie, official Django movie, and then talks about turning it into a Keoma sequel. And he talks about his experiences with Fred Williamson and Leonard Mann and of course Franco Nero. So it's interesting if you want to hear some insight on the film industry of trying to remake these movies and all these things like that. But yeah, Top Line from Cauldron Films, good stuff. It's a fun action adventure, sci-fi, horror, mystery, bonkers ass fucking movie with Franco Nero. I enjoyed it. It's definitely kind of up my alley in weirdness and stuff like that, but that's Top Line. All right, the next one is from Mondo Macabro, and this is Fata Morgana, which I think is some sort of like certain kind of mirage. In Italian is what it means. Like it's like a very complex or special kind of mirage, which makes sense for this title, even though this is like a Spanish-German co-production. 1965, and this one is weird. Like I don't even know how to go about this movie. This is an eclectic kind of film. This is not going to be for everybody. And while watching it, I was like, this is gorgeous. It's shot in a gorgeous location, and it's mixing in these weird subgenres of science fiction and comic book and spy movies. And a lot of these classic old spy movies are not really my jam, but it's also like psychedelic spy shit. So I'm like, this is like out of my element. It's just a bizarre film. There is a murderer going around, and there's kind of like this like professor trying to like document the murders and who's going to carry out the murders and why they're murdered. And we also following this supermodel around who also is an agent comes in trying to prevent it. But we also have these young boys who are like setting up this kind of like workshop of like a picture of her they cut down from a billboard, and this professor is constantly going through the movie in different disguises and everything like that. I'm not gonna lie, to me it was really hard to follow. It was really bizarre and lots of twists and turds and everything like that. And this is one of these movies where you're watching and you're like, I feel like I'm lost. I feel like not everything's connecting well. And then I think like at certain times you're supposed to be like, maybe it's not supposed to. Maybe it's just kind of supposed to be like just a wild ride of weirdness and craziness and give yourself to the movie. Or am I just an idiot? You're like, am I just thinking too much? Or am I not thinking enough? It's one of those ones. And sometimes those movies work for me, other times they don't. Not on first-time watch, for sure. Like Fata Morgana, I would say, is a movie that you might want to watch a couple times before you can grasp it. Or I watch it a second time, and I'm just like, no, I don't think there's anything there for me. I don't think it's a horribly made movie or anything like that. Like I said, it's well shot. It's very bizarre. But I have noticed myself having a real trouble with spy films from the 60s. Especially foreign spy films. I was never the biggest James Bond guy. So, seeing a lot of this stuff that may have some inspiration from James Bond or Danger Dollar Lake, which I still need to check out after all these years. I watched all these Mario Bava movies, and there's still a couple that I have not. And it's probably because I have never been a big fan of the comic book style spy film. It's just never been for me. So I'm not the guy to come to for these. There was a Greek one that I covered, Assassination Skybolt, which I thought was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And a lot of people tell me that is a particularly awful film. But this one I thought was much better than that. And I do find it interesting in a way, but I also can't really grasp exactly what the hell is going on. There's lots of twisted, weird imagery and beautiful imagery at the same time. A lot of good-looking people involved. But overall, I just kind of have to step back and be like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. And maybe that's the point. It's kind of a little cop-out on my end, but that's Fata Morgana. This is fully restored and uncut. Interview with actress Teresa Gimpera. Interview with Angel Sala, director of the Stooges Film Festival. Audio commentary from film critic Rachel Nisbet. Alternate opening sequence. A crazy, bizarre film. I think a lot more people will get more out of it than I did. But that doesn't mean it's a bad film. It just means that I was a little dumb on this one. All right, the next one up is from Well Go USA, and this was released this year. This is Sting. Now, Sting is actually made by an Australian director, and it takes place in America, in New York City, which is kind of crazy. They do a pretty good job of covering that up, that maybe possibly the exteriors were shot in New York. I'm not really sure exactly. Not all the actors are American actors, so that's obviously there. This director did Wormwood and Wormwood 2. I got a chance to watch Wormwood 1, and I've enjoyed it. Wormwood 1's a pretty cool film. So Sting, this is obviously a killer spider film, one of two that came out this year. I've not yet seen Infested. I've not been watching a lot of new movies this year. Probably not going to do a year-end list or anything like that. Not really my jam anymore, guys. But yeah, so Sting, here we go. Now, right in the very beginning of the film, we have this big kind of apartment complex with a wide array of strange characters. We do that thing where it's like we open up with part of the movie that takes place towards the end, and then we kind of go back and like this happened a couple days previous. We have this old lady who's just confused about she's hearing weird sounds in the wall. She calls an exterminator. Boom, crazy shit happens. And then we kind of, that's a little your stinger, if you will, to grab your attention and everything like that. So what happens is we have this kind of thing fly from space. It seems to be a small meteor. It lands in the dollhouse of this young girl. It's actually not the young girl's dollhouse. It's her aunt, aunt's dollhouse, her great aunt or something along those lines, who's very mean and bitter, and she collects dolls. Very strange, kind of uptight, alcoholic character. And what happens is this girl likes spiders and everything, so she puts the spider in a jar, and she realizes that this is a little bit more intelligent than a lot of your average spiders. It communicates with sound. She does dun dun, or makes a little noise or whistle, and the spider thinks that it's feeding time, so it will make the sound as well. What happens is the father is obviously, stepfather, and he's struggling with connecting with the daughter. We have the wife as well. She's having trouble with this situation, and this daughter who just got this spider. It's a complicated family kind of history here. This father is a comic book artist, and he's working with the daughter to work on a comic, and he's also working as the handyman of this apartment complex. There is a strange kind of Asian guy in here who's working on, creating a cure for cancer by studying on animals. Not a really great guy. And we have the senile grandmother, and of course their great aunt who runs the apartment and owns it. And let me think if we have any. We have an alcoholic woman who's had a family tragedy. So the thing about this movie is, of course, the spider starts picking off things like the parrot and whatnot, but then it starts to pick off the residents of the apartment complex. But this movie is strange because in America it's rated R, and I think in UK and places it's 15, and I don't know who the target audience is, because this one really feels like it's more like gravitated towards 13-year-olds and that kind of aspect, and I think it would work better as more of a kids film, because there's some gross crazy kind of moments where we have like the spider taking people in the vents and tying them up a la Aliens or Alien or what you will, and that's fine, that's cool. And animals get killed and whatnot. No, it's no more violent, I don't think, than something like Arachnophobia. It's certainly not as scary as Arachnophobia, even though that's a comedy at times. I remember that movie being pretty scary for a kid when I watched it a million times. But also very fun. And I think that's where the movie would fit better as. While watching it, it had the problem of doing this. I feel like it kind of wussed out in some areas, towards the end, of course, which I don't blame it there. But its main problem with me was it was afraid to kill anyone who had any likability about them. So every character, they'll establish them, and you're like, okay, they seem okay. And then they'll do something really shitty, and then they're going to die. Get it? It's like, we can't kill any decent people. So after a while, you catch the pattern and realize everybody who's decent in the movie is going to be safe. So yeah, even there's a point when a character is introduced. He's been there earlier, but then like he's been all right the whole time, maybe funny, a little rude, but towards the end, he does something despicable just so they could kill him off. It's almost like a note where like, can you make all the people who die shitty so we don't, so the audience doesn't feel bad about it? We want this movie to be fun, or maybe it's like their counter, like we don't want to be too violent, so let's only kill pieces of shit. But all the while, it makes it stick out like a sore thumb. Like, oh, this guy's gonna die. You know, it's like one of those Star Trek. They always make the joke Star Trek. It's like, this guy, nobody knows who he is. You're going on the mission too, and he's obviously gonna die. He's cannon fodder. So like everybody in this movie, it's very predictable, and predictability is not bad when it's set up. Like somebody said that Nightmare Alley was predictable. The original, I meant the remake, and I was like, yeah, but this movie's not about whether it's a twist and turns kind of movie. I mean, it sets up a character, it's a character study, and they tell you exactly where this is going to go. I don't think there is really. I think it's a setup and a payoff. I don't think that Nightmare Alley is necessarily a mystery-filled movie. You know, I don't think there's much mystery to it. I mean, some people could go back and forth, but this one is just too obvious. I mean, and obvious is not always bad. But obvious stuff without guts. But the thing is, let me say some nice things about it. It's well made. It's well acted. It's well shot. The lighting's good. The music is good. The special effects are pretty good. Everything's good about it. It's a script is okay. Like, the script's not horrible. I like the movie. It's a good movie. But I just don't like that idea that it just kind of feels like the tone is off, where it's like, push a little further or pull back a little bit. It's just like, and people are like, well, that's great gateway horror. It's like, I mean, the gate's much scarier. The gate, you know, has that ending, but the gate doesn't really pull its punches and it scares or what happens to people. But the gate has that very happy ending. Monster Squad kills people that are good, you know? It kills a bunch. So the gateway horror doesn't always have to be completely safe. And I would say that this movie is kind of gross in places, but it is safe, relatively. So that's Sting. I like it. It's good. As far as the special features are concerned, we have cast and crew interviews and behind the scenes in a creation of the monster. So yeah, check it out. Fun movie. Not great, but good. All right, let's get into those 1982 movies.
I know I'm human. If you were all these things, then you just attack me right now. So some of you are still human. This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside an imitation. It'll fight if it has to. But it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies. Nobody left to kill it. And then it's won.
You son of a bitch, you moved the cemetery, but you left the bodies, didn't you? You son of a bitch, you left the bodies and you only moved the headstones! You only moved the headstones! Why?
For a girl like you to come into my life, I've been waiting for a girl like you, who love and will survive. I've been waiting for someone new to make me feel alive. Yeah, waiting for a girl like you to come into my life.
You bitch! You call me a bitch!
What's in the basket?
Open season!
How do we know she is alive?
Say, please stop it. There's no more time. You've got to. Please stop it. Stop it now. Turn it off. Turn it off. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop
First up here by David Schmoeller, who directed stuff like Tourist Trap and Puppet Master and Crawl Space from '82, is The Seduction. Now, this is more of a thriller kind of deal, stalker kind of movie. Like last year, I was talking about movies like The Fan or Tattoo. It fits more in lines with something like that, The Seduction. And this stars Morgana Fairchild and Vince Edwards and, of course, Andrew Stevens. Son of Stella Stevens. He's in 10 to Midnight, Day of the Animals, a slew of movies. But, yeah, The Seduction. This one I had never seen. I noticed the score was really solid. It was Lalo Schifrin. Morgan Fairchild, I know she's been in a slew of 80s TV, but I know her from Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge, where she plays like the mayor. She's perfect in that. She's great in this. She's got a great look. Plenty of TNA of Morgan Fairchild, if that's what you're looking for. So right in the beginning, we see kind of this character spying on her swimming, and she's with her boyfriend, and they seem to have kind of a really, she's a public figure, a news reporter, from my understanding, and they have a good relationship, and Andrew Stevens is horribly obsessed with her. Completely, utterly obsessed with her. And at first, he's just sending her letters, he's bringing her flowers, but of course, it's a stalker film. It's going to be more dangerous, more extreme. They keep telling this cop, Vince Edwards, it's going to get worse, and he's like, I'm just a cop, my hands are tied. It's definitely one of those movies where it's just like, yeah, go vigilantism. It's the 80s. We love Death Wish and the Death Wish sequels, and it's that kind of vigilantism where they just are like, cops aren't bad at all. They just have their hands tied. They're understaffed. They can't do anything. The law is fucked up. We want to take it in our own hands. It's definitely one of those, very 80s in that aspect, right? But again, it's one of these movies that's probably cathartic for middle-aged men to watch and be like, yeah, they're renting. They're like, I get to see Morgan Fairchild naked, and I get to see somebody take the law in their own hands. I'm in. Sign me up. I want to, so it's kind of doing that thing. It's well made. It's well directed. It's well acted. Andrew Stevens surprisingly plays a creep. I've always seen him play kind of an innocent guy. Besides, I think he's the father in Scared Stiff, where he gets that Amityville horror kind of thing, where it's like, this house is possessing me, and I'm turning into a monster. That's the one where it's like the old slave house, if I'm not mistaken, 87. Not a horrible movie, but I think that's the only other movie I could think of where Andrew Stevens kind of loses his shit. Usually he's kind of like the moral compass or the young guy who's trying to his best. But yeah, seeing him as a creep, he did pretty well. And of course, there's not like a high body count or anything. It's just creepy stalking until inevitably there is, that kind of law into your own hands. And they make sure that you're definitely on the side of the person who's taking the law into their own hands throughout the entire film. Yeah, it's entertaining, good score, well made, decent stuff here. I did really like Morgan Fairchild's friend in here. I wish she was in it more. She's very funny. She has a couple scenes, especially in the mall. I just like her. She's funny, she's quirky, she's bizarre. She plays like an actress in it. But yes, as far as the special features are concerned, we have interviews with actors Morgan Fairchild and Andrew Stevens and producer Bruce Cohen Curtis. Audio commentary with producers Erwin Yablans and Bruce Cohen Curtis, and writer-directors David Schmoeller. Remembering the Seduction featurette, remembering the Locations and Production featurette, remembering the Seduction and Law featurette, Still Gallery, theatrical trailer. And if you guys, this is a AFCO Embassy picture, so yeah, The Seduction, entertaining first-time watch for 1982. Okay, next up here we have a DVD release. I don't think this sucker's ever had a Blu-ray anywhere, and this is The Killing Hour. This is an old Anchor Bay DVD, aka The Clairvoyant from 82. And this is kind of a strange one that takes place in New York City, so you get that backdrop of kind of New York. It's a little sleazy, it's a little kind of, gritty and everything like that, but not necessarily in the same vein as a Basket Case or New York Ripper, and it never really crosses that threshold. Now, I want to say this, and I don't mean any, disrespect to this movie because it's not as good as Cruising or Dressed to Kill, but it kind of has that MO, but it has that clairvoyance, right? That clairvoyance of that fifth sense, or that sixth sense, I should say, you know, of like, well, I'm having this weird kind of thing, like, you know, what was the one I just covered last week? Blood Song has that, and these movies are blood link, or it's my twin, so I can see through them. It's a strange kind of weird subgenre within horror where they do it a lot. I mentioned Nothing Underneath, and it goes all the way back to Dracula. I can see through the killer's eyes, or I can predict the psychic Fulci. It's that deal as well, right, where I have this clairvoyance, this sixth sense. So there is a killer going around, and at first we see this woman get drug out of the water with handcuffs. She's nude. It reminds me of a very opening scene of Cruising, which I adore Cruising. I think Cruising's a better movie and feels more of a horror movie at times than this. The clairvoyance is really what pushes this over to the horror territory. Otherwise, this is very police procedural, very thriller. And then we have more people being murdered with handcuffs as the MO. The cast is really what helps this. And we have Kenneth McMillan as Lieutenant. Great actor from Cat's Eye to Runaway Train, Dune, the original. Great actor. Underrated. And then we have John Pilato, who is very thin in this movie. Never seen him this thin from stuff like Blank Man and, of course, Big Lebowski. I'm a fellow Seamus. Then we have Joe Morton from stuff like Executive Decision and Terminator 2. So it's got, and Perry King from Andy Warhol's Bad, class of 1984 from the same year, and Lipstick. So a really solid cast. The lead guy in here, Norman Parker, I don't know him. I know I've seen him, I'm sure of it. But him and the lead female, they're fine. They do a good job, but they're not necessarily really the people that I gravitate towards too. I know that very well. And I think that the weird kind of, one of the weaknesses of the film is not necessarily the acting of the lead guy, it's the character of him. He's also a stand-up comedian / detective. It's just weird. They add these elements where he's always trying to like do impressions, and it's just like, I don't know what the director's obsession was with like the New York comedy scene. Maybe he wanted to squeeze that in there. Maybe he knew some people. The director, actually, Armand Mastroianni, I hope I said his name right. I'm sure I didn't. I think he did. Are You Alone in the House from 1980? Maybe he didn't. I think he did. That's the one where the slasher from 80 kills all the soon-to-be brides. And he also did Cameron's Closet. So he has a few horror movies. This one does have like a unique kind of like backdrop, because all those movies about New York City and the grittiness are so prevalent. People know them. Like, they're so infamous, right? Everybody's like has the 5 or 6. Like, you got Basket Case, you got all the Glickett House, Shapiro stuff, you got New York Ripper, you got all these movies, Maniac. They're so known. The Bill Ferreira movies, the William Lustig movies, but this one's not really talked about. The Clairvoyant or the Killing Hour, and it's there. So there's a handful of killings. They're pretty crazy. All of them involve handcuffs, from somebody being handcuffed to a car with a brick on the accelerator in the car, to people getting killed in the elevator shaft handcuffed. The reveal I remembered. It's really sleazy, gross reveal, dark reveal. And fitting, I think, for some of these kind of slimeball characters in here. It's overall, it's solid. It's not the best movie ever made, but The Killing Hour I enjoy. This does have some deleted scenes on there, which kind of establish some of the victims a little bit longer, which makes the ending reveal make a little bit. I wouldn't say it all makes sense, but I would say it makes it a little bit more, for like you're going to see it coming. A little bit more, but not necessarily. Some of it's a little bit, how could I see that coming? But it's got to be something, right? And then we also have an audio commentary with director Armand Mastroianni. So yeah, The Killing Hour, I would like to see this get a Blu-ray, because I've seen a lot worse movies get the special treatment, and I don't know, maybe this is one of those ones where the elements are lost or somebody's holding up. But I mean, we got Are You Alone in the House, and we also got Cameron's Closet hasn't had a Blu-ray either. So yeah, maybe we'll see The Killing Hour, maybe not. Let's do a couple quick ones from 1982. Early Frost, an Australian movie directed by normally a producer of Australian movies. He produced Allison's Birthday and a handful of other Australian movies that I think people would know. This is just kind of one of his earliest movies he worked on. This is Early Frost. The title, they kind of reach out with the end music, and you're like, I don't know if that fits. But so what we have here is, this movie, it's a little slow. It's a little bizarre. So we kind of follow this drunk middle-aged woman who is living her worst life, honestly, not living her best life. She kind of, hooks up with this other middle-aged guy she's having an affair with. She has like a best friend who's looking out for her all the time, who is a kid who's obsessed with crime. And then she has 2 kids of her own, a younger one and an older one, who just, they kind of despise her. They don't like her. She's never really been around. The father's not in the picture or anything like that. And there's these old women being killed. Now, they're found dead after a stroke in a pool, but it's really fishy because a private eye kind of enters the world. He goes to this drunk woman's best friend and says, listen, I think your friend's in danger. I don't know the connection just yet, but she's probably in danger. And the mother thinks that her own son's trying to kill her. And as it progresses, we learn that somebody's trying to pick off all these people of this old picture. And you're like, who could it be? Is it the strange person obsessed with crime? Is it one of the own kids? Is it like her new sleazy piece of shit boyfriend? It's very melodramatic. It's less horror than you would think. Thriller, mystery, drama. Overall, it's decent. It does have a nice little reveal and then a double reveal kind of at the end. Which makes a little bit more sense, but the one reveal, you're like, is that just something to throw you off? Overall, Early Frost is one. I had not really heard much about this one. It's not like it was one of those big heavy hitter names of Australian horse cinema from the 80s, like, or 70s, like Patrick, or of Road Games or anything like that. It was one that I was like, maybe I saw the title because I see every title. I look through every horror movie possible, but it was one that I did not much about, did not hear anyone talk about it. Overall, it was pretty decent. I kind of going back on my words just a little bit, because I wouldn't call it a hidden gem, but I would say it's a good movie, not a great movie that I hadn't really heard much about, and that's Early Frost from Australia. The next one from 81 is The Witch with Flying Head, by the director. This is actually from Taiwan. This is the same director of The Devil, which is a bonkers-ass movie from 1981, gory, violent Taiwanese movie. And The Witch with Flying Head, kind of in the same vein as Mystics in Bali from the year previous, and later on there's a couple countries that had that mythology of the flying head. I think the South Korea have their own mythology, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Indonesia. Like a lot of these countries, I definitely have seen more flying head movies from different places around the world. So Taiwan, in the very beginning, this woman, she's kind of threatened to marry this piece of shit, and she says, I don't want to do it, and her family's like, don't do it, and he curses her to, at night, have her head fly off and attack people. It's not as well done as Mystics in Bali. And she starts picking people off, and I was like, this is really cool. So they move out in the country, and, they're like, we're just not going to marry him. We're not going to give in, and we're going to find somebody to kind of reverse this curse, right? It doesn't necessarily work, and in the country, she's out there, and she's like walking, and these two guys are like, yeah, we're going to get some. They're going to rape her, obviously. It's an 80s movie after all. And her head flies off, and she kills him, and it's just like, oh, shit. But I was like, this is really crazy. It's cool. It's not as good as like Queen of Black Magic or Indonesian. Indonesia had a lot of wacky movies from 1980, 81. And I'm like, it's not on that level just yet. Mystics in Bali, Queen of Black Magic, well, we could get there. And then as it progresses, I'm like zoning out. I'm like, where are we going with this story? We start to get this melodramatic thing. We start skipping timelines, and I'm like, who are these characters? An evil witch enters the thing, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening anymore. I'm lost. I am completely lost. At the very end, we have a showdown, like in these movies that we do, where they kind of face off, and I was like, the ending's cool. The opening is cool. The first act I like. The ending is decent, but there's a middle thing where I'm just like, oh, maybe my attention span is getting worse as I age, or maybe these movies are more inept, or maybe I'm just getting less patient. I don't know, but there was a certain point in this movie where this lost me. I was liking it, bored out of my fucking mind, became more drama, like a boring Hong Kong melodrama in the middle of like period piece where it's like, I don't know what's happening. I was just like, I don't know who any of these fucking people are, and they're all dressed the same, and they all look the same, and the picture quality looks like dog shit. And then the end of the movie I thought picked up again. Overall, it's decent. I think it would do well if it was remastered. And context would fucking help, I'm sure. And then when you watch these, you're like, am I watching it fully uncut? Am I watching the best quality version? Am I watching the appropriated subtitles? You know what I mean? So Witch with Flying Head, worth note, worth interest, not perfect. I would check it out, though. It's on YouTube with subtitles, so there's multiple versions, I'm sure, if they're out there. But yeah, I would check it out, but I can't really give it a wholehearted recommend. All right, now is up as the Patreon pick, and they picked a good one. One of my favorites from 89 by Peter Greenaway, who did Drowning by Numbers. Excellent film Severn put out. And this is The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover. This stars Michael Gambon and, of course, Helen Mirren. Now, Helen Mirren, you got to give it up for. Helen Mirren was in a lot of fucking cult movies that no one remembers. She's in The Cook, this one, of course, I'm saying, and she's in Caligula. And you're just like, wow, man. Helen Mirren was always worth putting in the crazy shit. And she's willing to get naked and just have sex scenes. And you get the idea that she's doing them only when she kind of respects the material. I don't know what it is about Helen Mirren, but she's just like the classiest woman ever. And she tends to just look better with age. Now, Michael Gambon in this movie, it's got to be one of his finest performances. He's an actor I've seen, but this is the performance I always remember him. Georgie! This is a bizarre film. Peter Greenaway, the couple of films I've seen, his movies are incredibly well thought out, incredibly elaborate. He is very interested in a lot of things, and he puts those things in his movies, and he studies them to the finer details. I like that this movie feels like it is a play at times. The way it's shot, it's wide. You feel like you're on a stage. But the visual transitions in this movie are wonderful. They're perfect. We go through, and we do have like music and singing in here, but it pertains to like one kind of character who's singing "Blot Out My Transgressions," who's a young person. So the movie falls around in Britain, this high-class French restaurant ran by this cook, and he has like this elaborate group of people, these cooks and people that clean and all these things. And there is a group of people that frequent the restaurant casually. There's a kind of a guy who works in a library who's always there reading, very nice gentleman, quiet. And then there is Michael Gambon and his gang of goons, along with his wife Georgie, Helen Mirren, who is completely abused and trapped and just intelligent, but just a very smart person, just trapped in this situation with Michael Gambon and his goons. A lot of his goons are character actors you would remember. Tim Roth is one of them, and a lot of the other ones are just very memorable. The guy who plays Spangler, and there's a couple other ones too. And they're all just kind of, you watch Michael Gambon just treat everyone like dog shit in this movie, and just talk out of his ass as if he is an expert on everything. He's like, that's what they do. He's eating just gross. The movie is so focused on eating and food, and the way the dishes are laid out are done in immaculate detail. The production design on the actual dinners is so wonderfully perfect, it's insane. Also, like I would say the same thing with Drowning by Numbers. Like the way he lays out visuals and cinematography and placement for his films, it's just unmatched, because he'll have like a wheelbarrow with apples spilling out in the background like a tree, and just like everything is done to such fine detail. And this one is no different. The soundtrack is wonderful. The score, the way they choose to use the music, the visual transitions are great. The acting is unmatched. The story is very intriguing. It's very heartbreaking. It's very sad. Michael Gambon, should have probably won a fucking Oscar for this. He's such... If I had to pick one of the most revolting, disgusting characters I can think of, just blabbering moron, Michael Gambon. He reminds me a lot of the guy from Man Bites Dog. Just how he's like eating and throwing up, and he was just talking out of his ass and just not right about anything he's saying. But he has such, such like he just says this commanding voice and commanding style, and he's so sure of himself. But yeah, just a great film, super well made, super interesting. About 2 hours long. Doesn't feel that long. I would really recommend this one. It's kind of a masterpiece, honestly. It's a very great film, a wonderful film. I would highly recommend it. And it's not necessarily a horror film, but man, it's a very dark crime drama. More drama crime, I would say, but it does have a really wicked sense of dark comedy too. And I think that Peter Greenaway does have a very wicked sense of comedy. He does see humor in death and stuff like that, but there is a very infamous scene of cannibalism in this movie, which I think most people will remember it for. Questions, comments, concerns, and all that jazz. Stephen Hyde, another wonderful review. Thank you. Dom OB8585, really glad you enjoyed the Guyver release. I was so honored to be asked to work on several of the special features for this disc. I highly recommend picking up the copy of my book, Budget Biomorphs, The Making of the Guyver Films. If you'd like some more details about both films, it's a great companion piece to this release. That is awesome. I'll have to check that out. Great job on the special features of Guyver. Ken Coakley, I was floored when I found out you were going to review the Guyver live action film. A friend of mine is a huge Guyver fan. He likes horror and exploitation as well, but he also likes Japanese films such as anime, kaiju, samurai films, etc. While I love movies and take in a lot of information, I know almost nothing about anime. I told my friend about the Guyver live action coming out in 4K, and he was thrilled about it. He is such a Guyver fan that he owns a life-size Guyver statue. I've seen it before, but that was 30 years ago. I did revisit the film a few weeks ago and forgot how cheesy it was. It came across to me as a Power Rangers movie mixed with a full moon Moon film. Mark Hamill seemed to overact as a CIA agent. I thought he looked like Michael Biehn with the blonde hair and porn mustache. The star was kind of vanilla. I don't know where they found him, but I'm sure it wasn't the actor's studio. It seemed like a children's film a la Power Rangers with Three Ninjas. I enjoyed seeing my sweetheart Linnea Quigley in her cameo. She was hilarious and hot in the scene. I thought Jimmy Walker and the guy in the monster suit were hilarious in that scene. The guy in the costume did a great job with the body language. It was also nice to see Michael Berryman and David Gale as well. It wasn't exactly Ben-Hur or Citizen Kane, but it got the job done. Yeah, for sure. I think that the problem with a lot of versions of the Guyver, some come across a little bit more childish, and I think, when New Line put that out, I think that it was geared more towards kids, and the anime was hardcore violent. So it's very strange. It was a very strange mixture. It was more geared towards teens and kids, for sure, and I don't know if that was the right approach. Now on to The Beast Within. I had 2 copies of this film on Blu-ray, one that I bought from Screen Factory a few months later. My best friend got me a copy that she got from Tom Holland that was signed. Holland had a website that he shared with the famous FX artists that sold Blu-rays of their films. She got her boyfriend a signed copy of Beast Within and Fright Night. Fright Night hadn't been released on Blu-ray in America yet, so I was jealous. I wouldn't get Fright Night until I found a Swedish import at Bullmoose. Anyways, I liked The Beast Within very much. I didn't get the cicada angle until you mentioned it on the show. I had never heard of cicadas until I saw a CNN anchor eat one reluctantly, while telling us that we had to fight climate change by eating insects. While I admire John the Baptist who survived by eating locusts with honey, I still prefer a cheeseburger. I can still hear the crunching from when the anchor ate the cicada. The scene when the character transformed reminded me of the scene in The Howling when the character whose name I forgot turned into the werewolf. Eddie Quest. Eddie Quest is the character's name. Back to Linnea Quigley, I have a question. Do you have any favorite Quigley film? I have my top 5. I'll get to that in a second. The thing about, what were we at here? Oh, the cicadas. I mean, I grew up and there were cicadas a lot. I grew up when they had one of the big kind of resurfaces. I remember going around picking the shells off the trees and collecting the shells, putting them in a Gatorade bottle. I've always liked bugs growing up and insects and stuff like that. Used to lift up logs and catch whatever I could grab. So I was a strange kid, a bug kid. Can you believe it, right? Back to Linnea Quigley. I have a question. Do you have a favorite Linnea Quigley film? I have top 5. Return of the Living Dead, Night of the Demons, Graduation Day, Sorority Babes and Slide Blow-Rama, and Witchboard. I don't remember her being in Witchboard. You might be thinking of Witch Trap, which is directed by Kevin Tenney as well as he did Witchboard. I don't know if she's in Witchboard. Been a long time, but she is in Witch Trap, and she's good in that. Of course, it's Return of the Living Dead and Night of the Demons, 2 of her finest roles. I really like her in Sorority Babes and Slime Ball-Rama. I actually got to be in a movie with Linnea Quigley called Hunters, which is not a favorite movie of mine that I'm in, but Hunters, yeah. And I remember she was on set a little bit. Very nice person, very sweet person for sure. I think she's a vegetarian. Nick Bua from Belgium. I've been meaning to check out The Beast Within. Now I shall for sure. It looks like a ride that's equal parts gruesome and amusing. The appointment is very eerie chiller, isn't it? Edward Woodward is excellent and as a father who can't say no to his little girl, even if she turns out to be quite sinister. Questions. You can't buy everything under the sun, of course, but will you be acquiring Greg and Narki's Teen Apocalypse trilogy from Criterion? I'm sure on November, if it's on sale, I'll grab that. Would you ever take the back road or take a shortcut through the woods if you were in a rural area? Do I know the area? If I know the area, I am a nutcase, guys. I don't give a shit much about anything when it comes to that stuff. I mean, if I'm in an unknown area or a neighborhood that's not mine, I'm not cutting through anybody's yard because that's just asking for it. In a weird, I know it's not appropriate for them to do anything to you, but in the terms of a horror movie fan, I'm not doing it. But in terms of being afraid of taking a shortcut, if I know it's nobody's property or anything like that, man, we used to go in the woods that were behind people's houses and shit and do all sorts of dumb shit. I run at sometimes 4:30 in the morning. It's pitch black. I go through parks and shit around my house. So, I mean, yeah, I take shortcuts. Who would win in a little creature fight, the ghoulies or the gremlins? Now, there's going to be a lot more gremlins, especially if they get wet. But as you've seen by Ghoulies 2, they're indestructible. So, if we got that intelligent gremlin, the one who's on the talk show, if he picks up the book and gets an incantation and sends the ghoulies back to hell, sure, they're going to win. But if it's just a bunch of gremlins attacking ghoulies, it's just going to be them trying to bite through ghoulies or something. I do think that it depends. You got to give me a number. We got the 5 ghoulies from Ghoulies versus the 5 gremlins. The ghoulies are going to win. If you got 500 gremlins, the gremlins can multiply so much easier. So it's going to be very hard for the ghoulies to take out 1,000,000 gremlins. But it's just 5 on 5. Gremlins are done. Plus you got that giant fucking ghoulie. We're talking about the ghoulies from Ghoulies 4. They can't do shit. The ghoulies from 1, who knows? There's a lot of them, but they look weak. The 3 ghoulies from Ghoulies 3, who knows? I mean, you got to break down the situation for me. I can't just say verbatim. I gotta have a storyline. Then we have, till next week, remember, keep off the moors when the moon is full, for sure. The Big Bounce, Stranger's Kiss is interesting. I can't think of many fictional films about making of a real film. That is very strange. And then Espinado 2250, Ghoulies 2 is awesome. I'll never forget seeing that movie when I was like 8 and being terrified of the giant ghoulie. It's what nightmares are made of, indeed. Petrula... Lampella, I like The Beast Within. They went really overboard with the bladder effects in the end, and based on what they say in the bonus features, the scene was meant to be cut off way earlier. The effects guys were just goofing around to see how far they could stretch the head. I think it was the producers who wanted the footage of the movie, even though it was basically bloopers material. I guess I have to see The Appointment, as I usually love horror movies that have dreamlike quality and elements that don't really make sense. And also, you mentioned Let's Scare Jessica to Death, which is an all-time top 10. Steve Young, handsome, fit man, I am sold. I appreciate it, thank you. Hildix Talks, or is it Hitiki? I can't say. Hittikit Talks. Have you reviewed any other Wara Hare's film before A Ferret Vampire? I have not, but I do have a couple of his movies here, so maybe I'll get to them. And he says, you clearly a cat person, so I'm looking forward to those reviews now. His Beauty and the Beast is also amazing. Yeah, I've seen that. I think I do have his Morgana, and I have another one he did that I can't think of off the top of my head. But yeah, I guess we're going to get into the Patreon picks here. I'm going to draw it. David Luton already gets a pick, and he picked, I put it in my pocket so I wouldn't forget. So when I come back to watch which picks I get, David Luton had been not drawn out for a while. He gets The Way Out West, which is an old film. So Way Out West, comedy with Laurel Hardy, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to draw 4 more here. What we got? We got 2 here. We'll do it. Art Frigrito, Mannequin Sue, or IRU, You and Me by Obashi. Okay, anything by Obashi. I'm probably not going to do Mannequin 2 because I haven't seen Mannequin 1, so I'm going to do the Obayashi movie because I've seen a handful of his films and I do like them. So let's do that. Number 3 here, Jason Willard, Porco Rosso. Is that Kurosawa? Or not Kurosawa, Jesus. The guy, Princess Mononoke guy. There we go. Studio Ghibli. Then we got 4. Jim Simon, Porky's. Because I'm talking Porky. I keep referencing Porky's. Porky's one of those movies that was always on TV. I don't know if I sat down and watched it. I remember distinct scenes of them peeping on the girls in the showers and shit like that. But it's been years since I watched any of those things. And now we have Joe Carroll, Someone's Knocking at My Door. If I recall, that is the one with the guy, the villain with the giant dick, raping people. So yeah, we're going to watch that as well. That's a weird mixture of movies, for sure. Laurel and Hardy to giant dicks raping people. What's the difference? Let's just skip away. You know what? I'll be a lazy boy today, and I am going to just show the update right now. It's 5 titles. First up is the Kino sale. It's Cujo on 4K. 83's coming up. I have not watched Cujo. I used to watch this a lot as a kid. It's been years, so let's watch Cujo again. Then we have Night Gallery Season 2. This is the biggest season of the bunch. I have the first one. So now we got Night Gallery Season 2 on Blu-ray. I used to watch these a lot as a kid and love Night Gallery. And then, of course, we have Season 3. You might as well get the whole series at that point, all 3 seasons of Night Gallery. We love to just sit and watch Night Gallery, Tales from the Crypt, Twilight Zone. I love anthology horror. Big fan of it. I love the Amicus movies. I love, all that kind of, I love anthology horror. Old stuff, though, from probably 1980s, 80s and before. And then we have Fritz the Cat. Never seen Fritz the Cat. So see a perverted, crazy, animated thing. Dropping everything. Clumsy. And then we have The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat. Why have one when you can get both? Love the Kino sales. Always well-priced stuff. Yeah, but we're out of here. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, have a good one.